Good. So, Rosie's Plaques. Kate and I are two of a collective of slightly misbehaving women, I think you'd probably call us, who style ourselves as Rosie's Plaques. And we're going to tell you a little bit about us, about our history, about how we got to do what we're doing, what we've done, and where we're going next. So we'll canter through some of that. So that's the first picture you see is of a group of us. The very first night we went out putting plaques for women up in Norwich. So we're part of a theatre group, a community theatre group called The Common Lot that some of you may have heard of. Some of you may have seen our shows. We make large scale shows, generally performed outside, with, about and for the people of Norwich and Norfolk. Done a big one on Kett's Rebellion. We did one on Anglia Square a couple of years ago. We're in the process of making a mega show about the Marcross estate. It was 100 years ago, 100 years old this year, and was the first council estate in the country. We're unearthing some great stories about that. But we did a show 4 years ago, maybe, called Come You In. And Come You In was a show about immigrants into Norwich. And one of our group, Siobhan, was in the show, and she had a line in that show which said, "How come this is all about the great Norfolk men? What about the great Norfolk women?" And as she was standing there on the stage, she said she was thinking, do you know, that's our next show. So in 2018, we put on a much smaller scale show. We did it in the autumn half terms. We had a lot of teachers in our group, called All Mouth No Trousers. And it was the story of radical Norfolk women. And when we did the research for that show, because the way that we operate as the Common Lot is that we start out doing our own research in a number of different ways, one of which is coming into this very building, as you would imagine, and then discussing what it is that we want in the show, what we don't want. We had a lot of conversations amongst us. We were all women, about what constituted radical, and we won't go down that rabbit hole because it's quite an interesting but quite a complicated conversation. And we put on this show. But one of the things that we did while we were doing our research was go on a guided tour of Norwich, which was led by Jill Blanchard, who's a great local historian that some of you interested in local history may have come across. And Gillian did a bespoke tour for us, taking us to show us different places that have been used by, dedicated to, lived in by women in the city. And when she was doing that, she started pointing out to us the various plaques that are around the city. You know, the blue plaques, there's quite a lot of green ones in Norwich, there's a few sort of silver ones. And in total in Norwich, there are about 300 plaques to people, places, and events in the history of the city. How many do you think might be for women? Any guesses? Oh, if you're even more pessimistic now, it's 25. It's 25. And so when we were writing the show, we wrote a song. I say we, somebody wrote a song. And the last line, we would say, you know, we'd show you around the city, there are 300 plaques, and then there was a little pause in the music, and we would sing only 25 for women. And you could hear the collective intake of breath in the room. It really is quite shocking. And you'll see from the statistics here, just nationally, there are really a very small proportion of women who have statues or heritage plaques. Most of the streets in London are named for men, statistic I've just told you. And on Mile Cross, on its own, the original estate of Mile Cross, there are 30 street names and just one is for a woman. And that woman is Margaret Paston. And personally, I don't think she was a Mile Cross girl, but there you go. And one of the things about trying to get hold of the history of women is it's quite difficult. You have to kind of pull the women out from behind the men. You have to work hard to find out about them. So when I think we look back at the show we did, you'll see later, but the women were people like Dorothy Jewson, who was one of the first MPs, Mabel Clarkson, the first woman councillor. They're women for whom there was a public record, but there are many, many women who've done great things for whom there is no public record, and it's difficult to elicit their history. So I did a little bit of work on the streets of Mile Cross on those very men, those 29 men. Not a lot of information, but when you start to find it, there's a road called Bolingbroke Road, and when you look up Mr. Bolingbroke, you find that he's the chap who bought Strangers' Hall, and he bought it when it was more or less derelict. And he bought it to turn into a museum, but he couldn't make any money from it. So he moved his wife and his 6 children into the museum and carried on running it as a museum. That's got to be a great story, hasn't it? Walter Rye, who I think was quite a dry, antiquarian ex-Lord Mayor. Most of them were Lord Mayors, the chaps the roads were named after. He was probably interesting and important in his own right. His sister was one of the architects and proponents and people who really fought for the passing of the Married Women's Property Act, which is really significant in the history of women. Yeah, she's the person who should have the street named after her. Few examples here. Most of our street names, I think you can see which edge of the city I live in, with Bullard Road and George Pope Road. We actually, to be fair, we don't do too badly on statues. We don't have that many statues in Norwich. There's dear old Thomas Brown in the top right hand corner, and I think that's Wellington in the bottom there. But just to say a bit of an example of how many men are commemorated.
Castle, Bolton Dance. Burnham Castle. Yeah.
Burnham Castle. Absolutely, and that's a really recent plaque as well. I think that's in the last. That only went up in the last. It's gone up since we started this project in 2019. So I remember us being so cross about it.
Yeah. Even on the local news about the fact that it was all about him, and they were totally even partnership. Who knows about Ginger?
Well, as I say, did everything he did, but in high heels and backwards. Now, this is where the film should show.
Hi there, my name's Eileen.
Hi, I'm Nikki.
Hi, I'm Ali.
Hi, I'm Nicole.
Hi, I'm Eve.
Hello, my name's Claire.
Hello, I'm Fee.
Hello, I'm Kate.
I'm Maggie.
Hello, my name's Siobhan and I'm a Rosie. We started this project because we wanted to draw attention to the fact that out of 300 heritage plaques in Norwich, only 25 represented the lives of women.
I made a plaque and I'm responsible for the stories about the less famous but no less important women, the kind of women who rocked the boat as well as the cradle.
I'm Maggie and this is Patricia Hollis. I was lucky enough to know Patricia. She was a real inspiration to me and many other women in Norwich, a real role model to so many women, and well deserving of our plaque.
I love Norwich Castle. I love this story. More people needed to know it. That's why we gave Emma de Gelder a plaque.
The words for Scolds, written by another member of the group, really resonated with me. All the women who've been silenced over the centuries. We will not be silent.
When I read Margaret Fountain's exquisite diaries, I fell in love with her fearlessness, her independent spirit, her single-mindedness, and her ability to be radical without even standing on a soapbox.
Mabel Clarkson understood that the areas that are so often dismissed as domestic really should be at the very heart of public policy. She knew that if citizens were given decent housing, good wages, education and healthcare, then the wealth of the nation would follow, not the other way round.
That there is Dorothy Jewson, a very important political unsung woman, honoured by a plaque that made by women for our women, top birds.
In the early part of the 20th century, a branch of the National Union for Women's Suffrage opened a shop on Brigg Street in Norwich, selling badges, pins and books to spread the word and raise money for the movement. I loved making this plaque, but I especially loved seeing it on the wall, honouring women who came long before me, campaigning and fighting for our rights.
For me, the Roses project was a great way to celebrate some brilliant local women, to get them visible on the streets, and for people to go past and see one of our plaques and say, that wasn't there before. Who was this woman? I'm going to find out about her.
The thing that I really love about being involved with Rosie's Plaques is the making real and the making physical of all of these untold women's stories. We need more and more of it.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about once we'd had this idea, what we did and how we made the plaques. One of the Rosies you saw in that film with the black and white headscarf is an artist. And by chance, we bumped into her in a bar one night, as happens. And she said, I know how to make plaques, when the idea came up. And so over a period of time, we made the first 8 plaques of women that, and as Maggie touched upon, were probably slightly more famous women because we had history for them and we knew we could talk about. But they were all women we discovered as part of writing the show, and went out once a week out to Reefham to this artist's house and learned how to make plaques. And you can see here, it's quite a physical craft-based process. So some people were rather happier about this than others. Some people being more crafty than others. But basically, we have to make a mould for every single plaque. So you see in the bottom left there, people put levelling plasticine into a cake tin. It's a silicone cake tin, so it's easy to get it out again. And then we have to press every individual letter into that plasticine to make a reverse mould. And even that actually was not entirely straightforward because, of course, you're having to do it backwards. So it's quite hard to find stamps of letters that are backwards. They're expecting you to do them forwards. So we had to get some special letters cut, and then we stuck screws on the back of them, well, on the front of them actually, so they were backwards letters, and then we set off. And there were quite a lot of mistakes to start off with, to be honest. B's and D's and P's and Q's and all that sort of thing, very confusing. But we got better and better at it, and we learned to either hold it up to a mirror or to take a picture of it, because phones are always reversing pictures. And so we got better at that, but mistakes do still creep in. Then, as Maggie touched upon, when they'd all been carefully painted, which in itself is quite a tedious process if you're not very arty, because you get bits of blue on the white, you get bits of white on the blue, and you don't know when to stop. So when we went out, I wasn't with them that night, and put them up round Norwich, and you'd be amazed. Nobody takes any notice of you. Nobody challenges you. There was sometimes we wore high vis, which is also a good way of nobody getting it. You know, nobody wanted to know. I think Nikki actually got asked at one point, why are you carrying a step ladder? And she just said, well, in case I need one. And off the chap went. No particular thing. So we went round and we put a great deal of effort, obviously, into not damaging the buildings we put them on, because a lot of these people were associated. For instance, you know, we had to put something on the Guildhall for Mabel Clarkson, because that's where the council would have met in her day. And it's obviously a listed building, and we would be in a great deal of trouble if we damaged it. And we really didn't want that to be what people were talking about, that we were a group of women going around damaging old buildings. So we went through a lot of experimentation about how you could fasten things to buildings without doing any damage. We've really found railings are our only friend. We tried sticking things to walls. We've tried all sorts of things that come off, and some of them did come off. Some of them came off and broke. And but so we try and find railings on the buildings or near the buildings to get them up. They went up the first week of the festival 3 years ago. The last festival before lockdown, anyway, the last full festival before lockdown, 3 or 4 years ago. And we didn't say anything about them. We didn't put any information about them on social media, but people started spotting them. And they initially thought they were something to do with the festival. And Maggie had someone come up to her. But of all the people in Norwich, there were only really 2 festival volunteers, herself and myself, who knew what they were about. A chap came up to Maggie with his catalogue and things. I said, I can't find about the plaques. Where are all the plaques? And so she had to play a straight bat and say, I don't know about the plaques. What plaques are you talking about? And but it got picked up by the papers. We got people from, you can see we're on the television. We got people from, you know, around the world had picked up on this story. It just seemed to hit a zeitgeist of the moment, that people were talking about women and statues and women and recognition and women in history. And it just went a bit mad, really, for a while. So we a lot of people got in touch with us and said, we want to do this for our women in our town. Can you tell us how to do it? So because lockdown came, initially, we put together a pack of instructions, and we put together things online to help people and help them look to how they could start researching their women, where they could look and things like that. But once lockdown eased, and the next summer, we started to visit some of these groups. This is the first group we visited in Lichfield, in somebody's back garden, and they had researched before we arrived, 6 women, and we spent 2 days with them with our wonderful caravan, which you'll see a picture of in a minute, making plaques. That's a little representation which the women of Lichfield made of our caravan, and a little thing. They're called the Wayward Women, which is what their little plaque is there. But they made this, they put them up all around Lichfield. They all disappeared overnight. But fortunately, it was the council had removed them. And so, you know, when they talked about it, and they were able to put them back, and they're now on permanent display in a museum in Lichfield. So it was a good thing. Oh, wrong way. Can't press the right button. This is probably the most beautiful place we went, up in Pendle. This is the very last Clarion house. And if you don't know about Clarion houses, they're really worth looking up. They were places that were founded in about the 20s, when the Independent Labour Party was trying to find places for the working people to spend their Sundays and to get outside and to enjoy their own countryside. So they were a series of, bicycling was getting very, very important at that time as well for the populace. It was a cheap way for people to get out. And they built a series of these Clarion houses where you could go and get a free cup of tea and some bread and butter or a piece of cake and have chat and see the wonderful countryside. And this is the very last one standing. So a group of radical people who call themselves the Pendle Radicals were based there, and we went up to help them make plaques. And that is our beautiful caravan. But it did only get there through a lot of blood, sweat and tears, really, didn't it? What with little dry stone walls, steep hills, and then angry farmers and bumps. But it got there and it got back again, just. And then the final place we went last year, the following year, was this wonderful place in Macclesfield, which is a silk museum. So if anyone's interested in textiles and near Macclesfield, it's definitely worth a trip. And these women were probably the most efficient and organised we've met, actually. They had it all sorted. They were very great, and their plaques are just beautiful, really neat. They went up within 2 weeks, I think, and they had a grand opening in the museum, and the Lord Mayor of Macclesfield came all in his chains and what have you. And now they have a permanent home in that museum. Interestingly, the two of the ladies here are, for not all of you will be interested in this, but there is a daily blog called On This Day She, which writes about a woman who isn't famous, a woman in history, every day. And two of these women are the women behind that blog. So, oh, now I should be doing, this is you now, isn't it? You move.
Sorry. Can I just ask, did the other groups do the guerrilla work of actually fixing the plaques to build?
Yes, as they did, and some have been better than others. The ones in Lichfield certainly did, and the people in Macclesfield did. I think the people in Pendle, they did it a slightly different way. So they did something on International Women's Day last year where they toured with plaques to all the sites, and we're quite keen. They put them up. Myself and one of the other Rosies, as it happens, are going. We loved it so much up there. We're going walking up there at one of the bank holiday weekends, and we're going to try and put a bit of pressure on them to try and get them up. One of the ones that came down in Lichfield actually had gone up in the Lichfield Cathedral, and they threw it away. The others they got back, and they obviously felt terrible about it, and they contacted us and said, via the Wayward Women, and said, look, we'll pay for you to do another one. Well, of course it's not a project, of course there's cost attached, but we don't cost things. So they said, well, how much will it cost? And we said, 50 quid. And they cheerfully sent us £50 from Lichfield Cathedral. And we sent them, and we have sent them another one. I realise it's just one of the things to say is that you might be wondering why Rosie's plaques and why Rosie the Riveter, and our signature red spotty headscarves, and indeed our red spotty roof to our beautiful caravan. When we were first going out to put the plaques up in Norwich, we thought, well, we're a theatre company, and we like dressing up really, so we need to dress up, and we wanted something that would be quick and easy. And originally, because it was a guerrilla project, I was saying to someone earlier, we thought, oh, I don't know, we're all dressed in black and wear balaclavas, and we thought, no, that's seriously not a good look. So somebody said, how about Rosie the Riveter, who I'm sure was a sort of icon about the American war effort. And so we dressed as Rosie the Riveter, and then when everything started when the story broke, and we set up our Twitter account, again, I say we, I don't know about Twitter, but a Twitter account was set up, and it has to have a name. And Ali, who is our social media guru, mainly by dint of being 20 years younger than me and Kate, it just called us Rosie's Plaques, and Rosie's Plaques we've been ever since. So we are. But we just want to tell you about sort of one or two of the other things that we've done. Quite early on, somebody said, look, these plaques are lovely and they're conveniently round, so couldn't you make badges out of them? Great idea, we thought. So we bought a badge machine, which you'll see there's the order for it up there, and we started to make badges, and there are a few of them. Sorry for people online, there are a few of them here if anybody would like to buy one of some of our plaques. And we also started to do other merchandise. It's all available if people want it online, but we started doing tote bags as well. And when we did the first lot, which was back in 2019, we thought, well, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to sell them. We're going to have to take some money for them. And people were asking for them from all over the place, so we had to charge postage. So we charged just a little bit. We just charge £1 if you want to buy one today. But we gave all the money to Leeway, which is the local domestic violence charity, which I'm sure you're aware of. And then we've carried on making plaques. These are 3 that are in Norwich at the moment. And for our sisters who are just walking home, it feels today as relevant, or if not more so, than when we first put it up in November 2021. That was in response for the death of Sarah Everard at the hands of a serving Metropolitan Police Officer, and as you know, that's been very much in the news this week. And that plaque, it's being taken down now, but it sat in that alley, if you know Norwich, the alley that goes between the police station and the old fire station. It goes through to Bethel Street, no, St Giles, St Giles, and we put it there because it's just the sort of alley that women will walk through during the day when they're out and about, but maybe will think twice about going down at night. Woman, Life, Freedom was the last one we put up just before Christmas, and that was to respect our sisters fighting for women's rights in Iran. That's the rallying cry that they use. And Connie Adam, anybody heard of Connie? Connie was a fabulous woman who just died a couple of years ago. Local woman, lived in Norwich, brought her family up. She was a lot of firsts. I think she was the first female driving instructor in Norwich. When she retired, she took up fencing and became a world champion. And she had a real bee in her bonnet, quite properly, about the fact that only men could become freemen in Norwich. To become a freeman of the city of Norwich, you had to be the son of a freeman of Norwich. And she thought this was wrong. And she campaigned for years. She used to stand with her placard on her own in front of City Hall. And eventually she won her campaign so that women can now become freemen of the city of Norwich. And the great thing is, because her surname was Adam, she was the first woman to become a freeman. And when we did that plaque, we were trying to find someone from her family to say we were doing it and check it out with them, and we couldn't find anyone. And we put it up not all that long ago. And Siobhan, one of the other Rosies, and I were doing a talk just 10 days ago at St Peter Mancroft. And we got to this point and a lady put her hand up and said, Connie was my big sister. So we were absolutely delighted, particularly because only that day, a couple of weeks ago, we'd learned that someone had finally put up a Wikipedia page to her. So we're quite chuffed about that. So those were our latest women. We put one up in Mile Cross to a woman who was Ruby Alcock, who you probably won't have heard of, but she was the crossing lady on Mile Cross Road for at least 3 generations of Mile Cross children. You ask almost anyone whose family live in Mile Cross and they know Ruby. And that very much went up with her family's blessing. So the great thing is we are starting to get these stories of what we call extraordinary women. So they're not famous women, they're not women in public life, but they're all women who've done amazing things. And when it comes down to it, that's quite a lot of plaques that probably need to go up. So it's really over to you now. Feel free to ask any questions, the things that sparked in you that we've talked about, or anything that you haven't understood. And we would absolutely love to hear any stories that you have about other remarkable local women, because we're always on the lookout. But thank you.